I was updating the seating chart for my reception when Mom's text lit up my screen. Your sister's wedding is the family's priority. We can't make it to yours. No apology, no explanation, just a cold period at the end. The words sat there, sharp and final, like a door slamming in my face. I didn't call her back. I didn't argue. I just stared at those words until they blurred, typed back okay, and shut my laptop. But here's what they didn't know. While they were busy fussing over Sienna's big day in their rented country club ballroom, the world was about to discover something they never bothered to ask about. My wedding was already happening under the cypress trees of my own $5 million villa overlooking the Aegean Sea. And when those photos started circulating, the silence from back home said everything. Before I tell you how it all went down, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. Because sometimes the people who are supposed to show up for us never do. Act 1. The pattern. When people ask what growing up in the Montgomery household was like, I never know where to begin. From the outside, we were the perfect American family. 4th of July barbecues, coordinated outfits for the annual Christmas card, smiles bright enough to convince anyone we had it all figured out. But if you paid close enough attention, you'd notice the pattern. Every milestone, every celebration, every conversation somehow circled back to my younger sister, Sienna. She was the sun in our family's solar system. I was just the moon, keeping everything in orbit while staying invisible in her shadow. I used to think it was normal, the way Mom's entire face would transform when Sienna walked into a room. How Dad would spend entire dinner parties bragging about her cheerleading trophies and debate team victories. When I came home with my acceptance letter to Stanford or another award from a robotics competition, they'd give me a distracted nod and pivot right back to whatever Sienna had going on. Mom would say things like, "You're fortunate, Liora. Success just comes naturally to you. Your sister has to work so much harder." That word, fortunate, always felt like a knife disguised as a compliment. It made every late night I'd spent studying, every sacrifice I'd made, feel completely invisible. There's a photo album collecting dust on my parents' bookshelf that tells the whole story better than I ever could. Page after page of Sienna, twirling in her cheerleading uniform, blowing out birthday candles, posing before prom in that emerald dress. I appear maybe twice, always cropped at the edge or turned halfway away from the camera. When I was 16, I found a photo from Sienna's Sweet 16 party. I remembered standing right beside her when it was taken, but in the printed version, I'd been completely cut out. The frame stopped right where my shoulder would have been. When I asked Mom about it, she said, "Oh, the composition just looked better that way, honey." I didn't cry. I just stopped expecting to be included in the frame at all. My grandmother Cecilia was the only one who really saw what was happening. Cecilia had this way of pulling me aside during family dinners, squeezing my hand under the table and whispering, "Don't you worry, sweetheart. Some folks only see what sparkles. But real gold doesn't need the spotlight." She had a gift for making you feel seen without needing explanations. My cousin Naomi was like that too. She'd show up on my birthday every single year, even after my parents started forgetting. But favoritism doesn't explode overnight. It seeps in slowly, like water damage behind a wall, until silence becomes safer than speaking up. By the time Sienna and I were adults, that dynamic had become its own language. When she missed my college graduation because she had a spa weekend planned, Mom called it an honest mistake. When Sienna borrowed $3,000 from me and never paid it back, Dad said, "She's still figuring things out financially. You know how it is." So when that text from Mom came through about the wedding, I wasn't shocked. It just confirmed what I'd known my whole life. I'd spent decades being the accommodating one, the daughter who bent and adjusted so everyone else could stay comfortable. But that night, sitting in my apartment with Mom's message still glowing on my phone, something fundamental shifted inside me. For once, I didn't bend. I looked around my space, the soft amber light from my reading lamp, the faint scent of vanilla candles I'd lit to calm my nerves, the skyline of Seattle twinkling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. My wedding invitations were stacked neatly on the dining table, each one hand-lettered on cream cardstock with pressed lavender inside. I'd imagined them displayed proudly on my parents' mantel. Now I pictured them unopened, tossed aside, forgotten in favor of Sienna's elaborate celebration. But beneath that familiar ache, something new was forming. A quiet realization. This was my chance to stop begging for a seat at their table. To stop shrinking myself to fit into their narrative. 3 days after Mom's text, Sienna called like absolutely nothing had happened. Her voice was bright, sugary, that particular tone she used when she wanted something. Liora, you won't believe this. The Ashford estate, you know, that gorgeous venue we've been dying to book, had a cancellation. Same weekend as your wedding, but that's totally fine, right? You're in Seattle, we're in Charleston. Completely different worlds. It's practically fate. Fate. She actually used that word, like she just quoted it from some inspirational Instagram post. For several seconds, I couldn't form words. I just listened to the sound of her bangles clinking through the phone, and realized she was waiting for me to congratulate her. That's wonderful, Sienna, I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. Really perfect timing. She giggled, that carefree sound that had always come so easily to her. I knew you'd understand. You've always been so rational about these things. Rational. That was my assigned role in the family script. Level-headed, mature, predictable. The daughter they could lean on while they indulged her every whim. The next evening, Mom called. Mom's voice carried that careful, measured tone she always used when she was about to disappoint me but didn't want to feel guilty about it. Sweetheart, she began, about the wedding dates. Sienna's fiancé's family can only make that specific weekend work. She's extremely stressed about all of this, and it would mean the world if you could be flexible. Flexible. Another word that had defined me my entire life. So you want me to change my wedding date? I asked quietly. Mom hesitated, and in that pause, I could hear her choosing her words carefully. We just think it would be easier for everyone, honey. You're so independent and self-sufficient. You'll understand. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Easier for them. For her. For Sienna. Not once did she ask what it would cost me to append everything I'd planned for months. Mom, I said slowly, you promised you'd be there. You promised. She sighed, long and weary, as if I were a difficult client she had to manage. This isn't about choosing sides, Liora. It's just logistics. That word, logistics, hit me harder than anything else. She'd said. Logistics was literally my career. I'd built an entire supply chain consulting firm around understanding logistics. It meant precision, fairness, integrity, making sure all the pieces fit together properly. But in my family's vocabulary, it was just another excuse for betrayal. That night, I called Dad, hoping maybe he'd be the voice of reason. He answered with his usual calm, practical tone, the one he used when he was about to tell me something I didn't want to hear. Pumpkin, you know how your sister gets. If we don't attend her wedding, she'll make our lives miserable for months. You've always been the strong one. The one who can handle disappointment. I bit down on my tongue until I tasted copper. So it's my job to understand? Again? Like always. He didn't answer directly, just cleared his throat uncomfortably. I hung up before I said something that would crack our relationship beyond repair. For a long time, I just sat there in the darkness of my apartment. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator and the wall clock ticking past midnight. Light from my engagement ring caught the edge of the coffee table, scattering tiny reflections across the wall like fragments of something I'd been trying to hold together for too long. That's when everything crystallized. I realized my family wasn't cruel in loud, obvious ways. Their weapon was omission, leaving me out of photos, out of conversations, out of priority lists. I'd been trained from childhood to interpret their silence as love, their neglect as normal. Not this time. I opened my laptop, pulled up my bookmarks, and clicked on a listing I'd saved 4 months ago. A stone villa on the Greek island of Santorini, perched on the cliffs overlooking the Aegean, surrounded by ancient olive groves and wild thyme. The photos looked like something from a dream, whitewashed walls glowing gold in the sunset, bougainvillea cascading down terraces. If they wouldn't show up for me, I'd create something they could never ignore. The next morning, I booked a flight to Athens. No announcement, no family group chat drama, no long explanatory email. Just one decision made in silence. When the plane descended over the islands, the light was different than anywhere I'd ever been. Softer, more forgiving, like the sun itself was welcoming me home. I took a ferry to Santorini and hired a car to drive along the winding coastal roads until I reached the villa I'd only seen in photographs. It was more breathtaking than I'd imagined. Centuries-old stone the color of honey, weathered wooden shutters, terraces that seemed to cascade down toward the impossibly blue sea. Olive trees stretched into the distance, their silver-green leaves shimmering in the breeze. The caretaker, an elderly man named Andreas, handed me a ring of iron keys and said in careful English, "This place, it waits for someone who truly sees it." For the first time in months, I felt seen. Inside, the air smelled of limestone and history, like a place that remembered every voice that had ever echoed through its rooms. As I walked from space to space, I realized this wasn't just a house. It was a blank canvas, a chance to rebuild my story without anyone editing me out of it. Over the next 3 weeks, I poured myself into transforming it. I hired local craftsmen who treated every beam and tile as if it were sacred. The sound of hammers and traditional Greek music mixed with the constant whisper of cicadas. Every evening, I'd sit on the main terrace with my notebook, sketching out plans for the ceremony space. One long rustic table under a canopy of grapevines, strings of Edison bulbs overhead, no head table, no complicated seating hierarchy. Just one place for everyone who actually chose to be there. The locals started calling me the quiet American lady, and I loved that. My silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strategy. When I called my fiancé and explained my plan, he didn't question any of it. He just said, "If this is what peace looks like for you, I'm all in." And for the first time in my life, I believed someone truly meant it. A week later, I began sending out new invitations. Not the formal engraved ones I'd originally ordered, but simple cream envelopes with pressed olive leaves inside, handwritten in deep blue ink. Personal. Sincere. Real. The first went to Naomi, who'd never once forgotten my birthday. Then to Grandma Cecilia, who'd always seen through the family's illusions. One by one, responses started arriving. Naomi called me first, her voice tight with emotion. "We heard what happened. Aunt Patricia told everyone Sienna's wedding was the only one that mattered. We are done pretending. Liora. Send us every detail. We'll be there." Her voice cracked halfway through, not from pity but from fierce loyalty. By the end of that week, flights were booked. Grandma sent a message that made me cry. "I've missed too much real love in my life. I'll be in Greece, my darling girl." They started a group chat called The Real Family, and my phone filled with photos, passports, packed suitcases, laughing emoji. The morning of both weddings arrived under the same sun, 2 completely different worlds unfolding thousands of miles apart. In Charleston, the air was thick with southern humidity and tension. The Ashford Estate ballroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers, everything meticulously decorated in blush pink and champagne gold, but there was an uneasiness that even the $10,000 worth of peonies couldn't mask. Half the chairs near the front sat conspicuously empty. Mom stood by the entrance in her lavender mother-of-the-bride dress, smiling too widely, pretending not to notice how many familiar faces were missing. Dad checked his watch, then his phone, then scanned the entrance again, his expression growing tighter. "Maybe their flights got delayed," Mom whispered, her voice brittle as old china, but deep down, she already knew. No one was coming. Inside the bridal suite, Sienna adjusted her cathedral-length veil for the 6th time, her hands trembling slightly. Her bridesmaids hovered around her, whispering among themselves. "Where's Grandma Cecilia? Didn't she always sit in the first row?" At every family event, one of them asked. Sienna's practiced smile wavered. "She must be running late," she said, but her voice cracked on the last word. The photographer shifted awkwardly, quietly suggesting they reposition the remaining guests to make the room look fuller. "Maybe bring everyone forward," he offered gently. "Sure," Sienna said, forcing a laugh that fooled no one, her hand trembling as she gripped her bouquet. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, that same sunlight poured over the whitewashed cliffs of Santorini, catching on ancient olive leaves and turning the Aegean into liquid sapphire. The villa glowed like something from a painting, stone walls draped in cascading bougainvillea, Edison bulbs already twinkling in the late afternoon light. The long harvest table was set beneath a canopy of grapevines, lined with beeswax candles, wildflowers in mismatched ceramic vases, and hand-painted plates from the village pottery. Naomi's twin daughters chased each other through the olive grove, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. Her husband Felix tuned his guitar, softly testing the opening chords of a love song. Grandma Cecilia sat in the front row, holding a small olive branch she'd plucked that morning. "For peace," she'd said, her eyes bright with meaning. "Real peace." I stood inside the villa, looking out through the arched doorway at the gathering crowd. My wedding dress wasn't elaborate or covered in crystals, just silk the color of champagne, simple and elegant, catching the golden light perfectly. Sophia, the local baker who'd become a dear friend, tucked a sprig of wild thyme into my hair and whispered in her accented English, "For courage and for truth." When I stepped outside, the breeze lifted the hem of my dress, carrying the scent of rosemary and sea salt. The guests turned, faces glowing in that legendary Greek light. Grandma rose first, pressing her weathered hand to her heart. "There's my girl," she said softly, and for the first time in my life, I truly believed those words. There was no string quartet, no choreographed processional, just Felix's guitar, the rustle of grapevines, and the sound of people who'd actually chosen to be there. As I walked down the aisle between the chairs, I thought about every empty seat that had once represented my life, forgotten birthdays, unattended graduations, a lifetime of silences I'd mistaken for peace. But here, every single seat was filled. Every gaze met mine, unflinching and full of love. The officiant, a friend of Sophia's who spoke beautiful poetic English, began, "Love is not measured by how many are invited, but by who shows up." Those words landed in my chest like a key turning in a lock. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't read from paper. My vows came out like breath I'd been holding for 30 years. "To the ones who show up," I began, my voice steady and clear, "this love is for you. For those who believed in me before I ever proved I was enough. For the ones who stayed when it wasn't convenient or easy. For choosing me." Naomi openly wept. Grandma nodded slowly, whispering, "That's my granddaughter." When the ceremony ended, applause rose around us, not performative or loud, but warm and deeply human and alive. The courtyard filled with the sound of genuine laughter and the incredible smell of Sophia's kitchen, roasted lamb with lemon and oregano, fresh tzatziki, her famous spanakopita. As the sky turned from gold to deep violet, the Edison bulbs flickered on overhead. It wasn't perfect. It was real. Halfway through dinner, Naomi showed me her phone, half laughing, half shocked. "They're already talking about it," she said. Photos had begun circulating through the extended family group chats, images of the candlelit table, the villa glowing against the darkening sky, the long table under the grapevines, Grandma laughing with Felix's arm around her shoulder. Within hours, those images reached Charleston. At the Ashford estate, Sienna was posing for formal couple portraits when one of the bridesmaids gasped, scrolling frantically through her phone. "Wait," she said, her voice rising, "isn't that your family? They're in Greece." "What?" Sienna frowned, snatching the phone from her bridesmaid's hand. On the screen was a photo of me and my husband standing beneath the Santorini sky, Edison bulbs glowing behind us, our actual family smiling around that beautiful long table. Grandma holding up her symbolic olive branch. Naomi's daughters throwing rose petals. Sienna's face went completely white. The photographer hesitated, slowly lowering his camera. Around them, the murmur started soft at first, then spreading like wildfire through the ballroom. "Isn't that Aunt Ruth and Uncle Calvin?" "Wait, I thought they were supposed to be here." Mom leaned over Dad's shoulder, her eyes narrowing at the phone screen. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice sharp with panic. Dad's face drained of all color. "It's Liora's wedding," he said quietly. "They went to hers." Sienna's breath hitched audibly. Mom didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The silence that followed was louder than any shouting match could have been. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Someone coughed awkwardly. The band played on, trying desperately to fill the tension, but even the music sounded hollow and desperate. When the officiant offered a toast to family unity, not a single person raised their glass. Back in Santorini, laughter rippled through our courtyard as Sophia refilled wine glasses and announced, "Eat, drink, remember why you came here tonight." Grandma reached across the table and took my hand in both of hers. "I've waited a long time to see this, Liora," she said, tears glistening on her cheeks. "This is what family was always supposed to look like." The night deepened into layers of gold and violet and indigo. Someone started playing a slow, beautiful song, and guests began dancing barefoot on the ancient stone terrace. For a moment, I stepped away from it all, walking toward the olive grove at the edge of the property. The air smelled of wood smoke and wild lavender and salt from the sea below. The villa behind me glowed with life and love and laughter. My phone buzzed insistently on the table. Messages, missed calls, voicemails piling up. I didn't check them. I didn't need to. In Charleston, Mom's voice trembled as she called again, this time leaving a message that dripped with wounded pride. Liora, how could you do this to us? To your sister? Everyone at this wedding is talking about it. Do you have any idea how foolish you made us look? I listened to it the next morning, sipping Greek coffee under the same olive tree where I'd said my vows just hours before. The sun was rising over the Aegean, turning the cliffs to amber and rose gold. I hit play one more time, then deleted it without a second thought. They thought public humiliation was the punishment I designed. It wasn't. The real consequence was something far more profound, the realization that I had moved forward with my life without needing their permission or validation. The photos kept circulating for days, shared by cousins, reposted by old friends, commented on by people I hadn't spoken to in years. That image of Grandma raising her olive branch became a quiet symbol of our reunion, our chosen family. No dramatic captions, no angry explanations, just simple truth captured in golden light. For years, they had literally cropped me out of their pictures, edited me out of their narrative. This time, I didn't need to fight for space in theirs. I had built my own frame and filled it with light and love and people who actually showed up. The week after the weddings, Santorini fell quiet again. The Edison bulbs were carefully taken down and stored. The laughter faded into cherished memory. But the air still held the warmth of what we'd created together. That long harvest table stood empty now, scattered with dried rose petals and wine stains, proof that something profoundly real had happened there. One morning, as I was packing away the last decorations, my phone rang. Mom. For a long moment, I stared at her name on the screen, almost letting it go to voicemail. But something inside me whispered, answer. Not for them. For yourself. Her voice was shaky, defensive, wounded. Liora, do you have any idea how embarrassed we were? Everyone at Sienna's wedding was talking about your little event in Greece. You made us look completely heartless. I took a slow, deep breath, watching sunlight crawl across the terracotta floor. I didn't make you look any way, Mom, I said evenly. I just gave people a chance to see the truth that's always been there. Silence stretched between us across thousands of miles. Then a trembling sigh. You've always been so cold, so calculating. We were just trying to keep the peace in this family. Before I could form a response, another voice cut through, Grandma's, firm but calm. Patricia, that is quite enough, she said with quiet authority. You spent 3 decades asking this girl to shrink herself for your comfort. Now she finally stood tall, lived her own life, and you're calling it cruelty? No, my dear. What you're witnessing is freedom. Mom said nothing after that. The call ended quietly, like a door closing without drama or violence. I stepped outside into the olive grove, the ancient trees swaying gently in the Mediterranean breeze. Sophia emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her flour-dusted apron. Everything okay, my friend? I smiled, genuinely this time. Better than okay. It's finally quiet in all the right ways. She looked toward that long empty table and said softly, Then rest now, Liora. You have earned your peace. That evening, I set one last plate at the head of the table, the seat that had symbolically remained empty my entire life. I tied a small olive green ribbon around the chair and whispered to no one and everyone, for the girl who once waited to be chosen. The wind moved through the grapevines like a gentle, knowing sigh, and for the first time in my 32 years, I didn't feel forgotten or invisible or less than. I felt completely, gloriously free. Later, as the sun melted into the Aegean in streaks of orange and purple, I poured a glass of local wine and thought about Grandma's words. Love isn't logistics or management, she'd said. It's showing up. She was absolutely right. You don't need to fight for a seat at someone else's table, begging for scraps of their attention. Build your own table instead, and the right people, your real family, will always find their way to it. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me where you're listening from. And remember, sometimes the quietest form of revenge is simply living well and finding peace. Hit subscribe for more stories like this one.